Evening. This is Lisa Picker. On behalf of Carroll County Public Library and A Likely Story Bookstore, it is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's program with best-selling author Kristin Harmel. Kristin will be interviewed by Debbie Scheller, owner of Carroll's own independent bookstore, A Likely Story. We have just one short PSA for you. We want to remind everyone that no matter how old you are never too old for the library summer reading program. We've got a great app that you can use to track your reading and even write and read book reviews. You can earn books and even enter to win gift cards at A Likely Story Bookstore. Sign up at library.carr.org today. All right, on to tonight's program. Kristin Harmel is the #1 international best-selling and USA Today best-selling author of The Book of Lost Names, The Winemaker's Wife, and a dozen other novels that have been translated into numerous languages and sold all over the world. Fast facts about Kristin. She's written for People Magazine, Men's Health, and Women's Day, Travel and Leisure, Glamour, Every Day with Rachel Ray. Some famous folks she has interviewed include Ben Affleck, Matthew McConaughey, Outkast, Justin Timberlake, and McDreamy himself, Patrick Dempsey.
In my heart.
Her favorite stories, though, at People, however, were the Heroes Among Us features. Tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I think we know a lot about that right now. One of those features, the story of Holocaust survivor turned philanthropist Henry Landworth, partially inspired Kristin's 2012 novel, The Sweetness of Forgetting, which was a bestseller all over the world. And she writes a book a year for Gallery Books, Simon & Schuster Publishing. A book a year. Kristin was born just outside Boston, Massachusetts, and spent her childhood there, as well as in Columbus, Ohio, and St. Petersburg, Florida. After graduating with a degree in journalism and a minor in Spanish from the University of Florida, she spent time living in Paris and Los Angeles, and now lives in Orlando with her husband and son. She travels frequently to France for book research. And let's be honest, she says she's totally honest with us for the pastries and wine. So I present Kristin Harmel.
Thank you. Wow. It sounds ridiculous when you read all that. I'm like, wow, I don't know, whatever. Thank you. That was a very nice introduction.
Kristin, we're very excited to have you. You are not only a USA Today and New York Times bestseller, but you're a Likely Story bestseller as well. We do always very well with your books. We love them. They always make our staff picks. The new one, the Book of Lost Names, is actually one of my staff books. It's great. It's wonderful. And you said most of your books are set in World War II in France. Do you have a passion for this time period or France itself? What brings you to these settings?
I do. And so I will, they're kind of, the reasons for them are separate, so I'll tell you both. France in particular, I was writing for People Magazine in my early 20s. And I found out in April of, I think it was 2002, I mixed the years up now, that I had maxed out my hours for the year and I couldn't work again until August. I had nothing to do for those months, but I knew I was going to keep getting a little bit of an income because I was writing a couple columns for other magazines. And the opportunity came out of nowhere to go live in Paris for the summer with another writer my age who I'd never met before, just another girl who was writing. And it was only for the summer. We were living in a professor's apartment for $600 a month, completely furnished, a block and a half from the Eiffel Tower, with the full view of the Eiffel Tower from our window. It was extraordinary. And that is where I first started writing my first novel. It's The Summer That Transformed Me. I had always wanted to write novels, but I was very much like on the fast track in the magazine world. And I hadn't really ever given myself permission to dream that had always been my dream. And so that's the summer that I sort of found myself. And I think therefore France settled deep within my heart and never left. So I started off writing chick lit and only transitioned to writing this kind of book with The Sweetness of Forgetting in 2012. But The Sweetness of Forgetting, which was set partially in France, as Lisa mentioned in the introduction, was a little bit inspired by Holocaust survivor Henry Landworth, who I interviewed for People magazine. We did a big feature on him. He had been in concentration camps from age 13 to 18, and the psychological impact on him was fascinating and troubling, and such something that stuck with me so much that I think the interview I had with him was in 2003, and it wasn't until 2010 that I began writing that book, but it was still him in my ears. So between Henry Landworth and then just a childhood obsession with The Diary of Anne Frank, I think that's what led me on my path. And then also, side note, with France, I later discovered that my dad's grandmother, who I had never known and had never really known anything about, lived in Paris, and had was French and was was a French war bride who got married and came over here with an American soldier. But she lived just a couple blocks from where I lived in France, and where The Sweetness of Forgetting was set in France. So it feels like it was all meant to be. It all kind of
absolutely. That is so awesome. So in your new book, the Book of Lost Names, you have you deal with a female forgers for getting paper to, especially for the the Jewish children, to getting them out, and she becomes part of the French resistance. What kind of research do you do on this? That with our time now, we're losing our survivors of World War II. And so there's not a lot of personal contact you can make anymore. How do you do this? What do you do for your research?
Well, that is a great question. And I will tell you that that's a challenge as someone who writes about World War II and continues to write about World War II, because you're absolutely right. Those firsthand opportunities to hear about it, one-on-one, are fading. Although I will tell you, I did speak about a week ago to a 93-year-old Holocaust survivor who had been part of the Bielski partisans in hiding in the forests of Poland and Belarus. And his was a story like I had never heard firsthand before. And he said some really inspiring things about strength. One of the things that stuck with me was, what did he say? Sorrow teaches us life and hardship teaches us life. And I thought that was a really good message. It was profound and a good message for today too. I mean, obviously the two time periods are not the same, but we're in a little bit of a dark time right now too. And I think maybe that's one reason why World War II stories continue to resonate. But for this book, I had written several World War II France novels. And particularly in the last two, The Winemaker's Wife and The Room on Rue Amélie, this idea of document forgers kept coming up. And, there were documents that were forged that played a role in the books. But then I started thinking, well, who was actually forging them and what were their lives like? And, exactly how much did they contribute to the cause and to the resistance? And I began digging into it just with some books about it, including one which was the story of Adolfo Kaminsky, who was a very prolific document forger. His story was written by his daughter, Sarah. And she wrote it in the first person through interviews with him. So that was a very intimate, it felt like having a firsthand conversation with this amazing forger. But once I had read about all these forgery techniques and felt like I kind of had a handle on them, and there are some fascinating things about the forgery, and I've tried to include those in the book, I felt like I really needed to get my hands on the type of documents that they would have worked with. So one of the things I got, and I don't have it over, I actually looked for it earlier and I have no idea what I've done with it. Like, how do you misplace something like this? But it's a 1942 baptismal certificate issued in France. And that would have been something very common for forgers to fabricate, because particularly for children who didn't have identity cards, and particularly if they were Jewish, which was the main reason you'd be forging documents for children, they would have needed a baptismal certificate saying that, oh yes, like this child was baptized. Of course they're Christian. They're unimpeachable. Of course they are. So you would need something like that. So that was an important thing to have and have in my hands and understand it. I also have, every time I pull this out, I feel like I'm going to rip it in half and I'm terrified. But unfolding it carefully, this is a travel permit issued, I don't know if you can see it with my lights on. I always have like the worst lighting here to show this. It's a travel permit issued on the 2nd of December, 1940 in Paris by the Germans by the Nazis. So there's like the heraldic eagle stamp that they would have used on
Wow.
things. And you can see, I mean, I've seen pictures of things like this, but it's one thing to see the picture and another to actually hold it in my hand while I'm doing the writing. And it really helped me to envision exactly what this document looked like, felt like, smelled like. Were the stamps raised? Was there embossing? How, what was the quality of the paper? Like all these things that you can't tell from an image and you can't necessarily tell from someone else's writing about it. So that was an important part of my research. I also had the Journal Officiel, which I mentioned several times in the book. This was the official government document of France, basically. It came out 5 times a week, and it recorded everything like naturalizations, marriages, divorces, property transfers, and it would have therefore details of the people who were engaging in these legal matters. And this was a prime source for document forgers stealing identities, because you couldn't just say, Bob Smith is 25 and he lives in Paris and everyone would believe it. You actually had to have an identity that matched up to something official, that if somebody looked into it further, they could be traced and there was a paper trail of a real person that would match their details. So this is something document forgers would have used. I have a whole stack of these. This one's from the 28th of June, 1944. So, right kind of in the midst of things. And in fact, some of the character names in my novel, some of the minor characters that didn't play important roles, I lifted directly from the Journal Officiel myself in honor of those.
Wow.
And then my final piece of silly research, I feel like it's so funny. I do this in every Zoom I've done this week. And I feel like for the people who have joined me like multiple times, they're like, they could probably recite it themselves. But it feels like being a kid again and doing show and tell, right? It's like,
That's right.
my orange item or whatever. But the other thing that was really kind of crucial to making this novel come alive for me as the writer, and then hopefully letting me make it come alive for you, was at the center of the novel is a book called The Book of Lost Names. Well, informally, that they call it The Book of Lost Names. And in this book, Ava, the main character, and Remy, the document forger she works with, so they're both forging documents for children. They are both worried about the children who are too young to remember their real names, not knowing who they are after the war. So they want to leave some sort of record of who they were and who they, what their names have been switched to. And they leave them in this book, The Book of Lost Names, using a code based on a mathematical sequence called the Fibonacci sequence. So as I was writing about the Book of Lost Names, which is fictional, so the code in the book is fictional, but I had the real life Book of Lost Names, which is a 1732 French religious text. It is exactly the text I describe in the book, down to the peeling corners and everything, the gilding on the spine. And as I was writing the code within the book, if I would say, for example, on page 24, they put a star over the V and VU and a dot over the E and oh. I was doing it in this book. So like everything is accurate using this book. And it's just this beautiful old antique 1732,
Wow.
Ornate falling apart book. This is the real Book of Lost Names that with my imagination became the center of this novel.
That's fabulous. That is, and where did you get the book?
The answer is always so uninteresting because people ask me that all the time. It's eBay.
That works.
but I promise I did it. I checked very carefully to make sure it was coming from somebody authentic with a good track record and all that. So it was something I knew I was looking for. I knew I was looking for a book that would have been an old book in 1942, which is when Ava first picks up the Book of Lost Names, and something that you might have found in just a random church library in France. And this fit the bill. I mean, you can't even imagine, I can't even remember, but like the strings strings of words I was putting in trying to find something like this. But I did find this from a rare book dealer in France. And he sent me this and it arrived and it just, everything clicked. I'm like, this is it. This is the book. It just felt like magic in my hands. And then he emailed and said, that was actually volume 1. Do you want volume 2 also? So I actually have an almost identical book. So for like the day that I accidentally, I don't even know, I'm treating it like gold, but who knows? But I also have to point out, it's really cool because the woman who designed Chelsea McGuckin, who designed this cover for Gallery Books, had never seen this book and didn't know that the real book existed. And I think they came out really similar. The one she put on the cover
looks
and
nice. Yeah.
I think too, but what's even more similar are the spines. So the spine of this book looks like an old book, and it looks a lot like this old book. So I think she really nailed it. It's just, I don't know, it feels like
I agree. And it is so eye-catching, and the spine definitely, you don't see them do the spine like that. And so it was definitely eye-catching and perfect design for it. Really good.
She's done my last few covers, and I have been so happy. She's one of those people that, like, if she moves on, I don't know what I'm going to do with myself, because she's just fantastic. It's a great cover.
That's great. Since you're talking about the cover, one of the things that as a bookseller, I find extremely interesting, and you may notice this as well, is with World War II books, especially in the women's fiction, all the women have their back to you. Why? Do you know why that is?
I have never, I mean, I don't know why for sure. My guess has always been, I mean, personally, I don't love books where you can see the character's face, because then it takes away, I mean, just personally, and I'm not saying I wouldn't pick up a book that had one, but I feel like if you see the character too straight on, it doesn't always match your idea, or it sets an idea in your head that you therefore carry into the book. So I kind of like the idea that it's characters with their backs turned, but I don't know if that's the logic behind it or what.
Well, I always felt that it was probably due to leaving it to the reader's imagination.
That's
as well.
what I think.
Yeah.
Although actually, I have not told this story in so long, but I'm just realizing as we talk that I have this book behind me, and I have to tell you, this was the Italian cover of my of The Sweetness of Forgetting. It's beautiful, right? So they did do a full face. After they did this, I was contacted by the girl. It's a model who had she's Russian, had no idea, like she had sold pictures as like stock images, and had no idea anything had been used as a book cover until, like, that was a really big book in Italy, and so it was like kind of all over the internet. I mean, not all over the internet, but you know what I mean. Like it appeared enough times that someone sent it to her and said, "Is this you?" And she wrote to me and said, "Hey, I think I'm on the cover of your book, and like we're still Facebook friends." Like, how funny is that?
Wow, that's all. You know, it's a small world. It really is. That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So before we go on, would you mind reading a little bit just to give people the feel of what the book starts with? So
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just read the first page and a half, because it kind of gives you a good idea of what to expect from the book. So and just to tell you, the novel is mostly set in the past between 1942 and 1944, but it is interspersed throughout with chapters in the present. And so it actually begins with a chapter in the present from Ava, the main character's point of view. She's I don't know if it says it in these first few pages. I think she's 86 as the book begins. So May 2005. It's a Saturday morning, and I'm midway through my shift at the Winter Park Public Library when I see it. The book I last laid eyes on more than 6 decades ago. The book I believed had vanished forever. The book that meant everything to me. It's staring out at me from a photograph in the New York Times, which someone has left open on the returns desk. The world goes silent as I reach for the newspaper, my hand trembling nearly as much as it did the last time I held the book. It can't be, I whisper. I gaze at the picture. A man in his 70s looks back at me, his snowy hair, sparse and wispy, his eyes frog-like behind bulbous glasses. 60 years after end of World War II, German librarian seeks to reunite looted books with rightful owners, declares the headline. And I want to cry out to the man in the image that I am the rightful owner of the book he's holding, the faded, leather-bound volume with the peeling bottom right corner, and the gilded spine bearing the title Epître et Évangile. It belongs to me and to Remy, a man who died long ago, a man I vowed after the war to think of no more. But he's been in my thoughts this week anyhow, despite my best efforts. Tomorrow, the 8th of May, the world will celebrate the 60th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. It's impossible, with all the young newscasters speaking solemnly of the war as if they could conceivably understand it, not to think of Remy, not to think of the time we spent together then, not to think of the people we saved and the way it all ended. Though my son tells me I'm blessed to have such a sharp mind in my old age, like many blessings, this one is mixed, most days I just long to forget. So that's just the first page and a half or so, but that kind of gives you a taste of how we dive into the story. But I can't hear you. I think get a unmute.
It grabs you right away. I remember reading the book. I had it as a advanced reader and reading the book, and I was totally mesmerized by it and was able. I finished it on a Saturday. It really captivates you. Historical fiction is my favorite genre, so it fit right into everything I love.
That's awesome.
With that, when you're writing, you talk about that most of it takes place in the past, but you do go back and forth a little bit from present day to 1942. When you're writing a book like this with the back and forth in time, do you write all one time period, or do you mix it up? How do you do your writing with that?
That is a great question. Well, so I'm a big outliner, so there's always an outline before I begin writing the book. And the way I think about things usually is not the order that the story unfold, like the chronological order of the story unfolding. It's the linear order that the story unfolds in the storytelling sense. And so different authors do it different ways. And I don't think there's a wrong way or a right way, but to me, I need to know where those chapters are going in the book, like how they're going to be sprinkled, in with each other, because that has to make sense from a storytelling standpoint. So I feel like if I wrote them as two separate storylines, they wouldn't fit, like the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle wouldn't quite fit together, which, you would fix during editing and it would all be fine. But to me, to know, and I just like that idea of like, let me give you a little hint of mystery in the present, and then now I'm going to unfold the past that kind of answers a little bit of that mystery. But in the past, I'm going to leave it a little bit of a mystery, and I'm going to come back to the present where I catapult off that and deepen that mystery. You know what I mean? Like, I like how when you think of it like a puzzle that works together, I like to do it that way. But I will tell you, I tend to write more chapters in the present than actually wind up in the book. So I think in this book, we cut, I think I tried to do it like I had done The Winemaker's Wife, which was past, past, present, past, past, present, past, past, present. And that worked because there were three characters. So it was Inez in the past, Celine in the past, Liv in the present, and then, repeat the pattern. I tried to do this one this way, like past, past, present, whatever. And it didn't work. Like more of the story of this book took place in the past and should take place in the past. And that is one of those areas where I'm very grateful to have a very good editor who caught that in the first draft, who just said, I know you have fleshed out this whole world in the present, but I don't think you need it. You need to condense some of it because you're getting away from the story. So, which was a good point.
Yeah. And do you find when going through the editing process and everything, do you find things being cut that maybe you regret cutting later, or that not regret, well, that wouldn't be a right word, but thinking that, I should have kept that in there, or, oh, this should have been cut. Do you ever find yourself doing that?
Not since I've been working with this editor.
Oh, that's great.
So I will say that in my early book, when I was back writing Chick Lit and I was very new at this and I didn't know what I was doing, I had a lot of regrets over one of my books, and I'm not going to say which one it was, but I kind of did every cut that the editor said, like, cut this, cut that. And I think the book was worse for it. And that was a good lesson to me. It was that we were we were coming at it from two different places. And instead of me saying, I understand what you're saying, but like, this is the place I'm coming at it from. Let's figure out how to make your changes while keeping it in my voice. I was young enough and new enough that I just said, like, okay, you told me to cut it, so I have to cut it. Right. It was a good lesson to me that that's not always the right thing to do. So the editor I have now, her name's Abby's Idol. We've been working together since The Sweetness of Forgetting, which I think we sold to her in 2010. So we've been working together now for a decade, which I just had that realization the other day, which is mind blowing. And again, we were saying before, like, how could it be a decade? Because I'm clearly, not old enough to have been, of course, writing that long, but Anyhow, Abby and I work so well together. And I think one of the reasons why she's a great editor is she makes suggestions and they come across like suggestions, not like orders.
Right.
And they're always, and there have been times that I've said, I know what you're saying about this, but like, I don't think we need to do exactly the thing you're saying. What's another way we can find to fix it? And I think that that has been one of the greatest things I've learned as I've developed as a writer is that, that when your editor tells you this is wrong, it is wrong and you need to find a way to fix it, but you can find a different way. There's always 1,000 answers to a problem within the writing of a novel, and you have to find a way that fits the novel. And so now that I know that, I don't think there's a thing I regret cutting. There are things that are hard to cut that I feel like,
Right.
oh my gosh, I labored over that scene for a week. Like, what do you mean I have to cut it? But the novels have always been better for it.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And you've kept your voice that way too by,
Yes. Yep.
making that's awesome.
But
it's
something, I'm sorry. I was just going
Go,
to say,
go, 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 go.
I was just going to say it's something I've learned. And like, I feel like with every novel, particularly, well, with every novel I've grown, like, I feel like each novel might not necessarily be better than the last, but I think I'm a stronger writer with each successive novel. And it's just part of the journey and like part of the lessons you learn along the way,
Oh, that's
like
awesome. I do want to remind everybody that please go ahead and type in questions in the chat boxes on Facebook Live, and we will get to them after we finish our little talk here with Kristen. So you write World War II for the most part, you write in France for the most part. Another part you do, and you go back and forth in time. You also, in this book, did first and third person. How difficult was that doing it?
It wasn't, and you're not going to believe me, but I didn't even think about it. It was just, that's the voice, but that's just the voice that the chapters came out in. So I think I tend to write in third person more now. I can't even, like, this is how crazy I am. I'm thinking now about The Winemaker's Wife, and I can't even remember whether that was all in the third person or whether the present day was in the first. I honestly can't. No, I think they were all in third person.
Yeah,
but
with this.
Too. Yeah, I think so, but I can't remember. But with this book, it wasn't even a conscious decision. It was just so the outline's always in the third person, right? And so I have the story down in the outline, and I outline really extensively. My outlines are usually like 20,000 words, which is about a fifth of a novel, but that's all in third person, even if the whole novel is going to be in first person. But I think in that outline, that's where I find the character voices. And I think that's where I have that little like voice in the back of my head that just says, this character you have to hear from firsthand, and then these characters we need to see from a little bit of a distance. But truly not even a conscious choice. So it wasn't difficult, because to me, 86-year-old Ava in 2005 was a different character in a different place in a different time than 20-something Ava in 1942. So it just worked. That's a good question. No one's asked me that yet. Great question.
Do you fall in love with your characters, or do you have any ones that you really don't like but they have to be in the books?
Ooh, that's a good question. I do, and I think as a writer you have to fall in love with your main characters, even if they're people who need to go on a journey to become better people, because everybody's redeemable, right? And like I used to teach a novel writing class, and I used to say in that class, like, even if you're writing the character who's a villain, like the antagonist, like not necessarily your main character, but somebody who's going to be like the bad guy in the novel. The bad guy doesn't think he's the bad guy, or the bad woman doesn't think she's the bad woman. Like, everyone has a reason and a motivation for what they're doing. So I think whoever you're writing, you have to find a way into their head and find a way to understand why they believe that what they're doing is correct. And in my last novel, The Winemaker's Wife, a couple of the characters really are making super bad decisions at the beginning of the novel and are like pretty unlikable. I mean, I think you can see why they are where they are, and they're not, I don't think they're characters that you hate. I think they're characters you just see as, particularly the character of Inez in my last novel, who is the young wife of a champagne house owner, who makes some really selfish decisions early on. But you can also kind of see where she's coming from, and the journey she needed to go on in that novel was a journey of growth. That was the hardest book I've ever written, I think,
Oh.
because I always want to make my main characters like these people I'd want to hang out with and be friends with. And at the beginning of that book, I didn't feel that way about Inez. So it was again another like growth exercise as a writer, you know?
And that's a great, I just want to put that out there for everybody. Also, The Winemaker's Wife just came out in paperback this spring, and it's fabulous as well. So, pick that one up as well when you're, coming into the store or the library. The Winemaker's Wife, any of Kristen's books, they're fabulous. You talked about a little bit the code you used for the book, and I had no clue what this was, and I did find out it is a true code. And I'm going to probably say it wrong. Fibonacci, is that correct?
I think it's, you know what? I've always been saying it Fibonacci, but I don't know there's no basis for that.
You're probably right.
I don't know.
You're probably Fibonacci Sequence. And that's a real code. What made you find this code, and how did you decide to use that within the book?
Well, that's a great question. It's a funny story. So I knew I wanted to have I knew that what I wanted to do with this. I knew I wanted to have a way for them to encode names, and the whole outline was written, and I still was like, how are they encoding these names? I don't know. Like, what am I going to do? And so that held me up for weeks. Like, I was searching all this stuff about how, like, the coders or the code breakers at Bletchley Park worked, and like all all these searches about like any realm of like coding and codes in the World War II. And then one day it occurred to me that when I was a kid, I was a weird kid, and one of my early dreams, probably like, I don't know, like age 7 or 8 or so, was that I would be the first kid in the world who was famous for solving math problems that real mathematicians couldn't figure out.
That's a great dream.
You got to dream big. I was like
right.
imagining myself as Good Will Hunting before Good Will Hunting had ever been made. So, whatever. But so I was really obsessed for years with math, with like, I had all these books of they had books, I don't know if they were even for kids or adults or what, but it was like books of unsolvable math problems, and I would read them and like think about I was good at math, and I liked math. I obviously haven't used any of that, but my favorite thing to do at night to fall asleep when I was about 7 or 8 was lie in bed and do the Fibonacci sequence in my head, because it was a math. And so it just hit me like a bolt one day, like this thing that I could do it without even thinking about it. Like I had done it that many times, but it had been 30 years ago. So I completely forgot. And it just hit me like a bolt one day. What if they use the Fibonacci sequence?
Wow.
And it was duh. So there you go. All those nights lying in bed, counting in my head like a lunatic paid off,
And that's really interesting that, you can bring these things from, your life and realize that, hey, this will work in here. That's amazing. So you have the town that it takes place in, Oregon. How do you pronounce that?
Orignon is how I would use it, but
I was thinking Avion, or something like that, but it's not. And the description is gorgeous. You really feel you're there. You want to be there. You think of these little small towns in France. And it was on page 49. I remember the description and everything.
Thanks.
That's not a real town though, is it?
It is not.
So you said you lived in France for a while. Did you take little towns and put them together to make this, or it come out of your
that was pretty much how it was, plus incorporating some of what I knew about specifically the towns that were off the beaten path that sheltered a lot of Jewish refugee children. So there was I didn't want to set the story too closely to any of the real stories.
Mm-hmm.
And the town I probably would have chosen is a town called and my French pronunciations are always horrible, but Chambon sur Ligne. I don't even know how to say it. Someone out there is probably laughing at me. You could correct me in the comments if you know, please tell me. But it was the town where a forger named Oscar Rosowski worked, and there was a big network that ran through there. It was affiliated with a local church, although not a Catholic church, like as is in the case of my novel. And so it was kind of based loosely on that town, but also on other French towns I've been to. And ultimately because the story of Ava and Remy and the priest, Father Clément, because they were fictional, I felt like the town that they needed to inhabit, because the town was such an important part of it and an important character in the story, it didn't make sense to choose a town at random that I wouldn't have had ample time to get to know. Does that make sense?
Yes,
I mean,
yes, absolutely.
Paris, I'm very comfortable returning to again and again because I lived there. I've gone back a million times. Champagne, the Champagne region, when I wrote The Winemaker's Wife, which is set mostly there, I had been there a couple times. I was able to go back and spend a good deal of time there. But this one, the level at which I would have had to know a specific town, I think just it wouldn't have worked. And so yes, it is a town of my own imagination, based very close.
It's beautiful. It really, the description is beautiful, and I can even see, you have the clotheslines hanging out. I mean, you think of that as a typical little French town in 1940s. It was perfectly done, and you're right. I think it was definitely a character in your story. It definitely was.
Well, thank you.
So, what inspired you to? And this is actually a question from one of the audience. They're asking, what is your interest in World War II France? So that was from Laura Stricken. She loves your dual timelines, and what sparked your interest in the World War II France?
Well, so we talked a little bit about how I had lived in Paris and how that mattered to me, and a little bit about why World War II is interesting to me because of Anne Frank and Henry Landworth, the Holocaust survivor I mentioned. But writing about World War II France, I will add to that when I lived in Paris in my early 20s, I had no idea how much had unfolded there because I had never really studied. I mean, I took the same history classes we all take through school. And I was interested in World War II, but to me, World War II was always something that had happened primarily further east, which was obviously not correct. But like, I didn't truly have a grasp of how much had literally unfolded right outside the doorway of my apartment. I mean, outside the doorway. I mean, and having that realization after the fact made me feel both terrible and ignorant, but also really inspired to make sure that, I mean, and now there have been a lot of novels written about World War II France, but there hadn't been that many when I wrote The Sweetness of Forgetting. I started writing it in 2010, which was years before The Nightingale.
Right.
I think Sarah's Key might have already been out, but it wasn't the thing it is now. I mean, now I would say there is a subgenre of World War II France, and there wasn't then. So I think when I started writing about World War II France, it was like, gosh, I don't know these stories, but I feel like people should know them. And then I stumbled upon this fascinating historical tidbit about World War II France, in which the Muslims of the Grand Mosque of Paris played a very active role working with Christians, also saving Jews, and that the Muslims there saved over 1,000 Jewish people who would have otherwise been deported. And it happened in various ways. Some of them they smuggled out through sewers. Some of them they produced false documents for. Some of them were actually sent to live with Muslim families. Some of them they created false gravestones in Muslim cemeteries so that the people could say, oh yes, that's my grandfather buried there. You see, we have the same last name. I mean, it was extraordinary, but to think that those three religious faiths worked together for just the good of humankind was so inspiring and uplifting for me. And that was the first time I felt like I have to tell this story. And then everything I've discovered since then has made me say, well, I have to tell this next story too.
So, and the next story, what are you working on now?
So I am venturing outside of my close little comfort zone and setting the next one in more Eastern Europe. And I don't want to say a lot about it yet. I was just watching a chat with my friend Mary Kay Andrews the other day, a book club chat that she did, and she and I are at about the same point in our stories. We write along with a few of our other friends together every morning. We text each other as we're writing, and we say go at 7 a.m. and whatever. But Mary Kay was saying exactly what I feel, which is that when you talk about a book too much while it's in process, you kind of jinx it. And it's not so much a jinx. Like for me, it's not so much superstitious. It's more like everything's a moving piece at this point. And so anyhow, but it's going to be World War II. It's going to be Eastern Europe. I'm 47,000 words into it. It's due November 1st. It'll be out right about this time next summer. And I can tell you that although the story and the setting are a little bit different, the core of it is sort of the same. And we had a guest, and we can talk about this in a minute if you want. We had talked a tiny bit before about Friends in Fiction, this Wednesday night show that I do. It's Wednesday night, 7 o'clock. Me, Mary Kay Andrews, Mary Alice Monroe, Patty Callahan Henry, Christy Woodson Harvey, and we have author guests on it. It's on Facebook. We had Jane Ann Krentz, the like enormously prolific romance writer on, and I think it was her. She was on with Susan Elizabeth Phillips, and I can't remember which one said this. I think it was her though, who said she said she thinks that we all have one story in us that we keep telling over and over. Not in a way that like we're repeating ourselves, but in a way that like there's a core story that belongs to each of us, and like every one of our stories springs from that core story. And I've been thinking about that ever since, and it was such a like light bulb moment for me, because I feel like my core story is like finding your light in the darkness and ordinary people doing extraordinary, like rising up to do extraordinary things. So like you will find those same elements and the same heart that are in my other novels, hopefully in this new novel.
I totally agree with that. I think you can, and when you, as a bookseller, when you're talking to people or you're making recommendations, one of the things we always say is, what is it that you like? What have you read that you like? And it gives us the feel of where their readings are. And as an author, it's very easy to say, oh, if you like that, then she writes just like this. So it actually, I totally agree with that.
I'm glad to hear you say that. Yeah, it was kind of a light bulb moment for me though.
So you brought up Friends with Fiction, which I am a big fan of. I wanted you to talk about it a little bit because I think, people watching, if they don't know about it, you should know about it. It's a fabulous, fun hour or so on Facebook on Wednesday evenings. And if you can't tune in, it is recorded. So you can, just like these are, you can go back and watch it at a later time. And it's a lot of fun, great authors on there. We've had now 3 out of the 5 of you as guests at A Likely Story in Carroll County. So you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, it's for me been one of the best things to come out of this whole shutdown. I mean, there has been a lot of darkness and uncertainty, and I have a 4-year-old. I'm worried about what we're going to do for school with him in a few weeks. There's a lot of dark clouds looming, but this has been truly to me one of the silver linings. So I'll just tell you briefly. So all 5 of us, and again, it's me, Mary Kay Andrews, Mary Alice Monroe, Patty Callahan Henry, and Christy Woodson Harvey. So we're all friends. And in addition to our friend Christina McMorris, the 6 of us had gotten together. So Christina McMorris is not one of our regulars, but she was part of the starting of it. At the beginning of the pandemic, at the beginning of the shutdown, we all had books that were coming out and that our book tours had been canceled. And so it was the beginning of April. I want to say it was April 2nd or 3rd. We all got together for just a casual happy hour. We said, chill the rosé and show up at 7. And, we got together on a Zoom like this and just talked. And the thing that the things that kept coming up in our conversation, which was again just a casual conversation, it wasn't like, how can we launch this thing? It was just, what are you thinking right now? What are you worried about? What's the way forward? And we kept saying we're worried about connecting with our readers because we all tour and we all really like to meet our readers. We worried about independent booksellers. We really were worried about independent booksellers because when we tour, those are events that help drive traffic into stores, right? So Absolutely. If you have an event or the library has an event, we're bringing awareness and hopefully sales that benefit both of you. And in the absence of that, and this was before a lot of booksellers like you had figured out how to pivot to Zoom. Like this was still in the phase that everyone was figuring it out. And we said, we want to do something to help. Because it truly, like, we were all really worried about it. And so that was April 3rd, I think. We had our first show on April 15th. We had the next morning, we woke up basically with the idea of like, wait, like, what if we could help? What if we could get like a few hundred people to turn up? And watch us talking about books. And what if we do it through the end of May? So honestly, we thought like it'll be amazing if a few hundred people join our group and watch us. And again, we'll go through the end of May because surely the shutdown will be over by then. But here we are, and the group has grown beyond our wildest imagination. We're almost to 14,000 members.
Wow.
We get, I mean, over 10,000 views on our weekly thing. And it's been wonderful. We get together for about an hour. We talk about writing. We talk about writing tips if you're an aspiring writer. We just talk about our lives. We talk about what we're doing. And then we have great guests. We've had Kristen Hanna. We've had Delia Owens. Oh, I mentioned Susan Elizabeth Phillips and Jane Ann Krentz. We've had Lisa Wingate. We had Jasmine Guillory a couple weeks ago. It's just been amazing. And we have no plans to stop now. I mean, this little thing that we thought, we'll do it through the end of May in case there's interest. It's been amazing. And I think we've been able to help some independent stores. But I mean, that reminds me to say that anyone out there who's watching this tonight, you're watching it because this independent store, A Likely Story, and because the library they've joined together to put this on for you. And, this is their time, this is their hard work. And, it doesn't have to be my book, but I hope that you would consider buying a book from them tonight or at another point if you're enjoying this or other presentations they're doing. Because, or it's even if it's not tonight, the next time there's a book that's on your radar that you want to pick up, think of them, because, it might cost a couple more dollars than ordering from elsewhere, but it's going to come with a personal touch, and it keeps the community thriving. Like literally, I mean, the local community, but also the literary community that they support. I mean, you're doing such important things. Just what you mentioned before about if someone comes into the store and says, do you have a book recommendation? Well, that's the personal touch you miss if there aren't bookstores you can just walk into. So I know I sound like I'm up on this soapbox and that like you paid me under the table to say this, but like, but I just think it's important. So, I mean, think about supporting the stores that are putting on events like this. Think about supporting your own independent stores if you're not in that area, but it's an important thing to do because, we love to read. We love to have events like this. We love to see authors. And the only way to be doing that is to be supporting the independent stores. All right. So my being a mean, like bossy lady is over. I'm going to step off my little soapbox.
No, we appreciate it. We appreciate the support that the authors give both the library and the stores, because it does make a difference. And I think the connection to the community is so important. And the fans love seeing the authors come in. And this way, what you are doing with your friends in fiction and doing these Zoom events with the different stores and libraries, it makes a huge difference. It's definitely a connection to your fans, and I think it helps all around. I think I really do.
And it's just fun. Like we have fun. Like last night we had the band Sister Hazel on, and they played their hit song "All for You." Like how cool is that? It's just a fun night.
So cool. That is really cool. So let's get to a couple things from Facebook here. Elaine Smith Puckett says she loves historical fiction and is looking very much forward to reading the Book of Lost Names.
Yeah.
And Kathleen Anderson Burnett loves hearing about your research and what's going on behind your novels.
Yeah.
Let's see. Anna, I might be messing up your name. I'm sorry if I am. Anastasia Joy Armstrong asks, what is a question that you wish your readers would ask you about this book? Very interesting. Oh.
Ooh. Well, and I know who that is. It's an Anissa Joy Armstrong.
Anissa.
And she, speaking of Friends in Fiction, she is one of our friends over at Friends in Fiction. And it is proof that it's not just 5 talking head authors talking at
Absolutely.
you. I mean, I have gotten to be friends with Anissa because she's one of our active members over there. Like I know her offline now too. So thank you, Anissa. So the question was, what question do I wish readers would ask me? That is a fabulous question. I'm stealing that next time I attend a book event because that's great. But I do not have a good answer to that. What do I wish you would ask me? I wish you'd ask me how tall I am, because someone has been saying recently on Friends in Fiction, or it came up recently because there was a picture posted of me, Christy Woodson Harvey, and Mary Alice Monroe standing together. And the comments on the picture, which it was on, I think on Christy's page, weren't anything about like 3 of my favorite authors together. No, it was all, I never envisioned them as those different heights against each other. Like the comments were all about our height. So I've said like, we need to address this in the show sometime, but I'm really short. I'm only 5 feet tall. And I've said that to people and they're like, no, but like you're sitting down. You look like you'd be like 5'8" or 5. And I'm like, I'm like a little shrimp at 5 feet tall. I cheat with high heels. So if you were actually seeing me at a live book tour event, I would have tricked you into thinking I was a willowy 5'3", but I'm indeed not. I'm a little shrimpy 5 foot. So.
Laura Streakin says historical fiction is her favorite genre also, and she loves having these author events. Thank you, Laura. We appreciated that also. Catherine Stillwell is asking, have you ever needed to find original documentation before you use it in earlier books you have written?
Like documents like I found for this one. I don't think so, because none of those books have centered around documents. So, but I've done obviously I've had to research using documents, but not in the way where I've had to like buy, a Nazi issued travel permit or a, newspaper or anything. For example, like the research for my last book involved, a lot of research into how champagne is made, because it was set at a champagne house in the 1940s. But it was research not just into how it was made today, but how it would have been made 75 years ago, which is a very different process. I mean, not a very different process, but there are enough differences in the process that I couldn't have just watched, a YouTube video about making champagne and then stolen from that, used it from that. So like one of the things I had to get, I don't know if this was really what your question was, but like one of the things I had to get for that book, for example, was a textbook from, I think it was 1960, that it was a how to make champagne textbook, basically, like it must have been like a college text from France. It was obviously in French, but it explained everything I needed to know. But I don't read French well enough to have understood it. I mean, like, so I shouldn't say that. I read French a little bit, but there was such a volume of information to absorb that, like, in the time that I had, I couldn't have gone through and like with the dictionary by my side and looked everything, whatever. So I had to hire a French translator to translate portions of this book that had, obviously the book had never been translated into English. So like that was another example of using a book, not necessarily a document, but a book to fill in some of the research gaps I needed. And then of course, when I traveled to Champagne and spent time in Champagne, I was able to ask, some of the champagne makers there, does this match up to what you know? Is this correct? Whatever. But none of the champagne makers there were making champagne in 1942. So I did need that, because none of them were that old. So I did need that book to fill in the gaps that even a firsthand interview couldn't have filled.
Oh, very, very interesting. Some people are asking about the URL for the discussion for the Friends and Friends and Fiction. So if you know, I can also post it after the fact onto our website, but if you know it off the top of your head.
Sure.
Yeah, I just go to your Facebook page is how I got it and join the group, and then you get it. But
it's super easy. So we're on Facebook, and if you just search for Friends and Fiction in the search bar, you'll find us. It's the first thing that pops up. But it is technically facebook.com/groups/friends and fiction. So just don't forget to insert that groups in there /groups/friends and fiction. Or we also have a website called, it's just friendsandfiction.com. So if you can remember the name Friends and Fiction, just go to our website and then you can click right to Facebook from our website, and that'll put you right in our group. You just have to join the group, but you'll be accepted within a couple hours. So and then you're in.
Everybody, all the authors on there, if you go to any of their pages, there's a link. I know that's how I got onto it too. Yeah, so that's very good. Yeah. Anita Meredith, thanks you very much. Thanks, Kristen. And she's found some wonderful new authors because of A Likely Story. Well, thank you very much, Anita, too.
That's good to hear.
Deb Weber Kiley is asking, what are you reading now?
Good question. I do a lot of reading for blurbs, and blurbs are like the little things on like that's, you know, so it like mine was a fascinating, heartbending page turner, said Christina McMorris, right? So they're like the little things either on the front or the back or the inside flaps or whatever from other authors saying why you should read a book. So it's kind of a thing that if you're an author and you have a little bit of a following, it's a good deed to do for other people. And it's a nice opportunity to read books that aren't out yet. So I did just read The Vanishing Half, which I really liked. But for blurbing purposes, I'm reading a book now that's going to be out in a few months called The Lost Apothecary. And it's a debut novel by a young woman named Sarah Penner. And it's very, very good. I think it's going to be a big book, The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I just recently reread Fiona Davis's Lions of Fifth Avenue. She had blurbed my book and I had blurbed her book. So I read her book back in January. But she and I did a couple of events together last week because our books are coming out right around the same time. And they both center around librarians. Hers, The Lions of Fifth Avenue, which comes out August 4th, takes place, excuse me, in the New York Public Library. And she, like me, is a former journalist. And her research for this book is astonishing and fascinating. And the plot is good. But like, if you've ever wondered about the New York Public Library, she talks about a family living in like basically a secret apartment complex within the New York Public Library, which is a real thing. So like, or not complex, but complex of rooms. I think it's 7 rooms inside the library. It is a fascinating book. Love books. It's a great book to read. What else am I reading? I think that's it right now. I know I'm going to get off and say like, it just totally forget. But like, so Fiona's going to be our guest on Friends in Fiction next week. But, you know, I'm going to try to read Ellen Hildebrand's book because she's coming on the beginning of August. And I haven't gotten to that one yet because my reading list has been so long. I actually just read Jasmine Guillory's new book too, Party of Two. And I just love her writing. Like she is just light and easy and
great summer read.
Great summer read. And it make you hungry because she talks a lot about cake. So all I've wanted is a big slice of cake since reading that book, but it's so good.
And Ellen's a lot of fun too, so I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see both of the Ellen and Fiona. That'll be great. It's going to be fun.
I'm so excited about it. It's going to be
wonderful. Kathleen is asking, have you ever had to decline a writing a blurb because you didn't feel you liked the book or it was worthy? You don't have to tell us who.
No, I know. I'm just trying to think if I like at what, because I mean, yeah, I have said no to blurbs before, but it's usually not for that reason. I don't always have the time in my schedule to do it, and so I try to do it when I can, and I really do. I mean, because blurbs are important, and particularly if you're a little earlier in your career, or if you're at a point in your career where you're trying to pivot to something slightly different, like those blurbs really, really, really matter. And I don't ever want to be the person saying like, oh no, I don't have time for you. You know what I mean? Like
right.
when you've been fortunate, like it's your responsibility to send the elevator back down, right? And like do what you can. And I'm not saying like Fiona, for example, needs my help to get anywhere. Like she's doing just fine on your own, but it's just, it's a good deed to do. But so no, I don't think I've ever specifically turned down a blurb because I didn't like the book, but I never say yes to a blurb request unless I'm already familiar with the author or unless I've read the first few chapters, I would say. Because it's not that I don't want to help everybody who I can help. It's more like if someone's voice just totally doesn't match mine and the story doesn't really, or I don't mean match, but like if it's not somewhat compatible, if I don't see it as something that my readers would probably like, it feels iffy to put my name on it. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, because you're not going to probably blurb a science fiction book, right? Even though they might be a friend of yours, just because your readership isn't in that same realm.
Yes, and I have turned down blurb requests like that, like just blurb requests that you can tell it's just a form letter that's gone out to everyone, and you know they might have changed your name, but there's zero specific reason they're sending it to you, and it doesn't make any sense. Like those ones, I've just politely said like, I don't really think this is a fit for me, but I wish you the best of luck. And then I feel like a jerk and I feel guilty about it for a day, but like, but it doesn't make sense for me to be putting my recommendation on a novel that wouldn't appeal to like the people who are reading my book.
Correct.
I feel like now I sound like a jerk. Like I try to blurb when I can, but there's only enough
But you're
hours a
busy.
day.
I mean, you have a busy day just like everybody else.
Yeah,
So, you know,
yeah,
it's not like you're
yeah.
sitting around waiting, you know, and it's not like you can sit and read. You have you know, all this time to just sit down and read
Well, I
because
mean,
you are
plus, you know,
working.
with a 4-year-old,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So what has been the most difficult part of this changeover in your tour, in your writing and everything with the shutdown of everything? What has been the most difficult thing for you as a writer?
Um, like specifically about promoting the book, or just in
Or
general
just in
about
general?
anything writing
Yeah.
related? Well, it's been hard not to get out there in person and talk about it, but I've actually really discovered I like doing this. I mean, I enjoy this. I do really miss seeing people and meeting people face to face, because I think that's such an important part of it. And I can't I really like that interaction with readers, and I like walking into bookstores and saying, you know, the books I like what am I supposed to read now? You know, you
Yeah.
miss those things. But I'm really comfortable with this, and I really like this, and I really like the ability to reach more people across a broader geographic area with each of these Zooms. I like that. Other challenges, just the childcare situation is completely different now. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
used to having my son should have been in school through the end of May, and he's been home with me since mid-March. During the summer, we normally have his babysitter, Lauren, who's an elementary school teacher. She usually comes about 15 to 20 hours a week during the summer. So I have those hours to work, and we haven't had her come in because we haven't felt safe. So I've gone from having like a 20-hour work week to having a 0-hour work week, unless I wake up at the crack of dawn, which now I do. And that's how I get my writing in. But it took me a long time to figure out that I could write in the mornings and still be like early in the mornings and still be productive and still be a functional human. So for a couple months, I really worried, like, I don't know how I'm going to get this book written. I don't know what the way forward is going to be. And then with publishing, the logistics of it are just different. The supply chain is different. The way warehouses stock and restock is different. And I didn't expect to be an example of this, but the Book of Lost Names is out of stock almost everywhere. Excuse me.
Yeah, and if you didn't pre-order, it's, you know, you might be having some problems getting it in.
Which has never happened to one of my books before, and I think it's partially because so many of you out there have been so kind and pre-ordered it and bought it, and it, you know, we had a lot more demand than we expected, which is a fantastic problem to have. I mean, no complaints about that, and truly total gratitude to anybody who's bought the book so far and created this problem. I genuinely mean that. But the solution to the problem would have been a much easier one before the pandemic, but now shipping, inputting, ingesting, filling those orders, all of that is happening on a delay, which makes things a lot more difficult.
Just letting everybody know, Kristen has actually been kind enough. She sent us book plates. So everybody who purchases any of her books will have a signed book plate inserted into the book for you. And we really appreciate you doing that. That is something that we miss as having the signed copies and, you know, being there, taking the pictures. I think that is, you know, it is missed. Though, as we said earlier, I think this is not going away. We are definitely going to have some type of hybrid. We're going to be doing this continuously, I think, as well as hopefully have you at the store or at the library at some point as well.
Well, and I will tell you, if I was in your store, I wouldn't be wearing my yoga pants right now.
That's
so
right.
it's, you know, this is, you know, you don't know that this is what's down here.
Trisha has said she's loved this, and she just won your book this week on Goodreads, and she said congratulations on your new book. So
thank you so much. I'm glad you won it. That's great.
That's great. So, and thank you very much, Kristen. We're going to close this up, and we, you know, please remember, you can come into the store, you can order online, you can give us a call. The library is open for pickup. You can go online and order the book and pick it up. Just make an appointment, and don't forget to sign up. Any age, you can sign up for the library's summer reading program, and it's a lot of fun. So thank you, Kristen. It's wonderful. Please don't forget, A Book of Lost Names and The Winemaker's Wave is now out in paperback. So please join us. And look for our other events coming up for the rest of the month. Thank you so much, Kristen.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure. And thank you everyone who joined us and asked such great questions tonight. I really appreciate it. Sorry for talking your ear off about Friends in Fiction too.
You're great.